All right, I'm going to stop you. I need a quick 30-second report out for each group of what you found and what the studies, what the methodology was, if there are any of the data sources we discussed here or some other way. So, since you guys went last, why don't you start?
Okay, we found an article that was about, they were testing different kinds of pedagogy and students that are teaching and seeing how that affected student engagement. So they used, they did observation to see how the engagement looked in the classroom, and then they also had the teachers assess themselves, like report on themselves, and the last thing that they used was testing, like pre and post tests of the, I guess, whatever they were learning in the class.
Good, good. So you see how that works? Pre and post test on the content, a survey given to the teacher to assess what they were doing, but observation of how the students were actually, what the students were actually doing in that classroom, trying to hit it from different angles, triangulating, right? Trying to put that data together to see if it all makes sense as a group with a kind of a mixed way of methodology. What did you guys come up with?
We had a article that was looking at mathematics, the study of mathematics in high school on like girls versus boys and their different opinions on it. And basically, so they started off with a survey so that they could categorize the different students, and they had like 3 different categories. It was like their sex, whether or not they intended to continue on looking at, like taking math classes, and something else I don't remember.
You actually took math classes?
Yeah, something like that. And then they had, well, if you were good or bad at math, like above the median, below the median. And then they had the students do like 3 different tests. So like a quick word test, visual spatial test, and then they had like them do belief surveys and attitude surveys about like their confidence, whether or not math is like a male domain, their attitudes for their success, as well as they looked at their mother, father, and teachers' attitudes on whether or not they could succeed. So there's a lot going on.
So they had them surveyed also?
Yeah.
Okay. So they even surveyed the parents on their attitudes and beliefs?
I don't think they surveyed the parents. I think they surveyed the students on
about their parents.
Yeah.
Okay, see, and see how where the danger is of that. This is what my mom thinks.
Well, it was
about
their perceived
That's
things,
right.
which is what was important for this survey in particular, because they wanted the students' opinion.
Interesting. Okay, good. So that's kind of an indirect measure there that we're going to get the students to try to report on what their parents believe. Okay, very good. Very good. Zoe, what you guys come up with?
We found a study called The Effectiveness of Secondary Math Teachers from Teach for America and Teaching Fellows programs. I guess basically what they did is they wanted to see the numbers that they took students and randomized what teacher they would learn from, I guess. And they used the examination of previously data to get their math achievement scores and demographics. And then they did the retest test method because they would compare their progressiveness through statewide tests and nationwide tests.
Okay, good. So using the files to figure out what kind of a category they fall into, and then a pre-test, post-test. Okay, good, good. Nicole, what you guys come up with?
It was actually, whoever says it was about.
Okay,
Sure, that's fine.
so this research was actually about girls refiguring science in an out-of-school time club. And it was kind of interesting because it was a qualitative study of 3 different schools, but this particular research article was a case study of a single school. And I was interested in the fact that they used so many different forms of, or so many different methods. Like they used videotaping of each after-school session, which they would then go through as a group and like analyze it and everything like that. They also had one of the teaching assistants take detailed field notes, which they would then put together each week and then expand upon them. That would describe what was happening in like the general feel of the group and everything like that. They also had a collection of student works, like collages and things that the students would create during each session. And then they even had one-on-one interviews with the students. I don't know if they took it with each student, but they were individual interviews, and Each one was about 60 minutes where they would ask them about their experience with it and everything like that. So I thought it was just really neat that they used so many different methods in order to collect data on this one topic.
Excellent. I think sometimes when you do the field notes and then follow up with the interviews, and I've done that, that's a cool way to do research, because you can watch your students interacting, and I might see you and maybe you and Nicole are arguing about something. And so afterwards, we're going to do an interview, and I might say, I noticed that you and Nicole weren't getting along when you were doing this particular part of it. What was happening there? Well, she was driving me nuts because blah, 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 and I can get some, so I observed it, I saw what was going on, but unless I actually ask you about it, all I can do is say, this is what happened. But I can climb into your head a little bit and find out why it happened if I follow up with an interview. So, okay, good. Sweet, how about you?
This article was about using games to engage learning in math class for fifth and sixth grade, and see if they have more of a positive attitude towards math getting these games. And some of the methods were in-field observation, pre-test, post-test, thinking aloud.
Pre-test, post-test, and what was the last one? Thinking aloud, so did they have to write that down, or?
It says think aloud verbal protocol. So I don't
Okay,
know.
so it's probably going to be, yeah, it's probably a type of, a protocol is, a verbal protocol is like a list of things that you're going to ask them in an interview. So they probably use pre and post testing and some interviews along the way. Okay, good. Sarah?
So we were having struggles with iPad and loading things. So I'm going from memory on one of the articles that I chose to use for my research project. And it's all about oral assessments and so instead of a weekly quiz, they had an oral assessment, which was an interview. And so after they did these sessions and these weekly oral interviews, they had quantitative studies, and they would ask them how did you feel about this? Or they'd have statements, so I really like this assignment. I agree with this, I don't agree with this, and they went through, and they were really extensive questions, and then they would also have open responses, so it was qualitative. So, said you agree with this, explain. And so then they were able to take, oh, I agree, I thought this was really effective, I really enjoyed it because I verbalized better, or I didn't enjoy this because I like to write things down, and things like that. So they had a little bit of both, so that they could clarify why people were answering the way they were with the quantitative research.
Okay, very good, very good. So it's the follow-up again. Okay, Corinne, Benny?
We found a study about a real analysis course. It's actually post-secondary, but they did a case study. And so they did two different types of methods where they did individual interviews with the instructor, but then they also observed the class. And so they also recorded the class and did transcriptions.
Good. Y'all getting the idea here? All right, so one of the things that is really important to think about is whatever it is that I'm interested in studying, I need to think about what are the best ways that I can gather data that will tell my story, that will help me to be able to draw the conclusions I want to draw. That's something that you and your advisor will need to work out. Because I can tell you that if you just use one method, and all you do is say, I'm just going to interview my students, that's going to give you a very narrow look at what's going on. You'll get a great in-depth conversation, but there's a bigger context going on there. But on the other hand, if all you do is just observe what your students are doing, and you don't use a survey or an interview, then you don't find out the details of why they behave the way that they did, and there's another missing piece. But you can't do it all, because that would be silly and they kill us, right? So we got to figure out what the best way is of being able to do it most effectively and efficiently, and put the methods together so that you can accomplish that triangulating. And you notice that every study you found used at least two different methods off of this list, if not several, to try to tell the whole story. And that's what you need to be thinking about. So, and just as a reminder, in looking at the final paper that you're writing for our class, for the 3160 class, for kind of the part D, you are not being asked to design in any depth a methodology for your study at this point, okay? And we talked about that in the beginning back in September, because the fact is, you're writing a literature, you're just talking about a problem and writing a literature review, and you're just going to suggest, if I were going to do a study about this, probably a good way to do it would be to use blah, 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 blah. You know, you choose some things off that list and kind of talk about what you could do. But I don't need for you to go into any depth here, because the fact of the matter is that's what you're going to be doing next fall. Once you're in your field placement, you know your grade level, you know your class, you finalized your question, some of you are going to redefine or maybe even change your topic around a little bit, and then you want to get serious about what exactly is the methodology going to be. At this stage of the game, I want you to think in broader terms of here's an educational problem I'm interested in, here's what we already know based on the research, and if I could do a study on that, here are probably some good things that I could do that would tell a story in my classroom. And you're just going to write literally a couple paragraphs on it. You don't have to go into a whole lot of depth there. But we wanted you to recognize what some of those ways are that you can collect the data. You can either think about, is this going to be qualitative, is it going to be quantitative, a little bit of both, am I going to do a case study, am I going to interview, am I going to do a pre-test? You know, what's that going to look like? If I were going to do a study on this, what might I do? Okay, without necessarily having to go into depth. Any question about that? Okay, so here's what where we are. Our last session for the semester is on December 3rd, which is a couple of weeks, 3 weeks, I guess. And on that night, we're actually going to have a guest speaker that's going to be with us, a person from the Human Subjects Review Board, that's going to talk to us a little bit about what it means to kind of get approval to do a study, which most of you are not going to need formal university approval. We want you to understand what that process is about, so we'll have her join us for that session. Between now and then, yay, no reading assignment. Okay, we want as far with the reading as we need to go this semester. I would say meet with your project advisor as needed. Just keeping in mind, again, our deadline here, which you need to have topics of your paper selected by January, and your proposals due by March 3rd. If you haven't seen your project advisor lately, you may want to do that. And I'll give you any other updates online. Okay? Have a great week.